Okay, Brooke is asking where we can find the recording. We will share more information through email. Yoli says, excited to see you all and of course learn from Josie. You are an inspiration. Yay, of course. All right, I think I'm gonna start. Let's just kick it off. Okay. All right, everyone's in until now. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is a very special live event. The Magic Jungle with our special guest, Josie Lewis. Hi, Josie. How are you? Hi.
Hello.
Hi. So Josie and I are colleagues. We have known each other for a while now, just through the art business world, I guess. I think we were part of the same mastermind for a while, and then we've just, had ongoing conversations about what's working for you, what's working for me. We had a really fun conversation during the pandemic, exploring options that we could implement during those weird times. And we've just continued to have this online friendship where we talk about art business and the Magic Jungle. So we have a mixed group here. Some of you know the Magic Jungle, and maybe some of you have come just directly from Josie. So I'll introduce myself. My name is Anna, and I'm the co-host of a retreat called Magic Jungle, which is in its 7th year. And we basically host a retreat for artists of all kinds. So this means it can be people who do ceramics, it can be painters, we've even had dancers, poets, writers, weavers, all kinds of artists are welcome at the Magic Jungle. And I'm seeing here some alumni saying which year you guys attended, so that's fun. I see a Magic Jungle 2019. I see you, Kat. And this retreat started out in actually 2016 was when we started to envision what we wanted to do here. And it was always thought for people who were artists and were really interested in also making a living off of their art. And slowly throughout the years, we really started to notice that the true power of this group gathering was we focused more on really exploring who you are as a person, and that will really facilitate just making the most authentic art possible, right? Which we really learned to understand that was the basic thing that everyone needs to do. And so we slowly started transitioning more to self-exploration. We just found that it was really powerful to be together in this jungle setting, making art together and doing different workshops that tapped into who you are as a person. And then we also continue to have these Q&A sessions where we talk about creative living, and we have, the question always comes up: how do I price my art? How do I know how much I'm supposed to be charging for my art? And just different ways to make money with your art. So if you're here and you're interested in selling your art, that's great. And if you're still wondering about it, this might be a good eye opener for you too, because not everyone necessarily wants to make money with their art. But if you're here, it probably means that you're already doing it or you're interested in it, right? Okay, so I'm just like a little not distracted, but having a lot of fun reading all this chat with all the alumni and where you are in the world. So the way this is going to go is that Josie's gonna do her presentation and introduction. For those of you who don't know who Josie is, she's an amazing artist with, I love that you're not only sticking to watercolor, but you do acrylics and mosaic, and you're also in the art licensing world like I am, and in the teaching realm as well. So I'll just let Josie start her presentation because we have a really full itinerary here, and I want to get to everything. So we will do Q&As later. So I'll be moderating the chat. If you have questions along the way, I'll try to write them down. And just for time's sake, I mean, we'll try to get to them at the very end where we can do a little Q&A session together. And also, I'll also chime in as well. So Josie, take it away.
Okay. All right. I'm going to share my screen. I have a little intro to just say a little bit more about me inside my presentation here. So here we go. Here we go.
Hi.
All right. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about pricing your art, which is the number one question that I get asked because I really like to help creatives make money. And one of the ways for artists to make money is to get the pricing right. And it's something that like causes a lot of psychological stress. Actually, people get very anxious, including me. I'm not the only one that gets anxious. There's many, many people. And so I put together this presentation that I've given a few times, and I see some familiar faces on the chat here. There's some people that I know came from my mailing list. So hi, guys. Hopefully this won't be too boring for you because I'm sure we've covered some of this before, but really excited to see my people in the chat as well. As we are going here, I know that Anna's going to be keeping an eye on the chat, and I will keep a part of an eye on the chat as I'm presenting, but we for sure want to get to questions at the end. So it might be that you'll have to, because sometimes the chat gets pretty full, so you might have to repeat your question later when we're able to take questions. But make a note somewhere, and then we'll be sure to try to get to at least some of them, depending on how many there are. Okay, so what we're going to cover today. This is currently, this moment is the best time in history to have an art business. And I don't think I'm exaggerating. It's a really extraordinary moment. It's like the internet there was a renaissance back in the 1500s, and there's another renaissance now. And I think in 500 years, when there's art historians and historians of all types that are looking at this period in history, they're going to be like, it was a renaissance. It was a different kind of renaissance, and it was really significant. We're going to talk about why you must decide what type of artist you are. I have a couple of different categories that you can decide where you fit. I'm going to give you the formula for a successful art biz. Yes, there is a formula, my friends. There is a formula. I'm going to talk about the essential mindset shift that artists must make when planning their pricing. This is one of the biggest pitfalls that I see artists kind of run into when they're thinking about pricing. And I'm going to talk about price tiers, which is different price points across the different things that you're selling, which I think can be very, very helpful. Hi, I'm Josie. This is me. Hello, hello. This is the chance where I get to introduce myself to you. I said in the chat that I live in the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul, in the cold north, and we still have quite a lot of snow. They say it's springtime around here, but we still have 2 feet of snow. So, it's not quite spring for me. You can find me on social pretty much everywhere as Josie Lewis Art. And my thing on social media is to post satisfying art videos of my process. I call it art attainment. So I film my process, and then I make the videos, 7 seconds long, depending on the trends that are happening in the social media algorithms. And then people love to watch those colorful abstract paintings being created. And then I also have some other little funny comedy bits. Like I always read my haters because I get a lot of people mad. So many people get mad, and I am delighted by it. So I read the haters. I just posted one today, so you can watch it if you want. And then I also have a bit called the Art Police, where it's satire. Helen says she loves the Art Police. Whoop, whoop. I feel like there's a lot of people that have big opinions about what should and should not be art, and they let me know. And so I thought I would make my own Art Police channel to follow up on some of those comments that I get. So I'm a full-time artist. I've been a full-time artist. I've been selling my art. My dad is a full-time artist. So I grew up in a painterly family, and then I went to college for art, and I went to grad school for art. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I was able to become a full-time artist, not just a waitress artist, a waitress slash artist. So it's been a really exciting adventure in the last few years to really figure out how to monetize my work. And something that I just love is to help other creatives, because I don't know if anybody here has ever been to art school, but they don't teach you about business in art school at all. And so even if you had gone to, college, it might not have necessarily helped you much. And so I have so many artists in my life that are so talented and their work is so good and so amazing, and they just can't make a living, And so then that means that their art, they don't get to spend as much time making art because they have to figure out a way to get money doing other things. So I love to support artists like you. So there's a couple reasons why this is the best time in history to have an art business. One, obviously, is the internet. We can access anybody, anywhere, at any time. Social media is a huge thing now, as we all know. Probably most of us know each other because of social media. And I know I've never met Ana in person. We know each other because I came across her work and loved it. And so we've become friends. And I have so many people like that, like just really quality humans that I've not been in the same room with. And I am telling you, I'm coming to Magic Jungle 2023, or do I have to wait till 24 now? I'm coming. I keep it always, there's always some conflict, so I can't come, but I'm coming. I swear it. Sounds so fun. So there are easy to build websites. You can have like plug and play websites. Back when I built my first website, which is probably like 15 or 20 years ago, even, it was hard, and it was hard to change anything. And it was like so clunky and so difficult. But now, you can get a Shopify site or a Squarespace site, or there's so many different platform providers that make it very, very easy to build your own website. There's safe electronic payment processing. There is the huge impact of Amazon and Etsy, which, Amazon and eBay before Amazon made it totally normalized to buy stuff online, which I am old enough to remember when it wasn't. So back in the day, Amazon wasn't a thing yet. eBay was a thing. And my friend wanted these like super bespoke boots, and she found this used pair on eBay, and they were, even used, they were several $100s. So they were really, fancy boots. And she didn't have an eBay account, but I did. And so I was like, oh, we can buy your boots on eBay. And we had to bid for them because it was back when it was auction. And she was so stressed out. Like, she was like, and then they take my credit card, and then they're going to ship me it was frying her mind to imagine that some stranger was going to get the money and then send her the boots. But now we don't even think of it. We just buy stuff online, and we trust people to send us stuff, and they normally do. I don't think I've ever not had someone send me something, like it's just very normalized in culture. And not to mention there's PayPal and there's Venmo and there's all sorts of ways to transfer money around the world that's safe for the customer and quick for me, the seller, that never existed before, or it was very complicated, especially globally. And then of course there's fast and reliable global shipping. Now I know Ana and I have recently had a conversation that that's not necessarily the case in some countries. So like Mexico, it's tricky. it's a little harder. So I know that that's not true. I'm in the US, and in the US, it really is pretty straightforward, but I know that that's not true in every country. So there's that little caveat. And then if all of that wasn't enough, the last few years of the global pandemic further changed the landscape. And that was because in the first year of COVID, from 2020 to 2021, I think 75% of brick and mortar galleries, like art galleries, closed because they just couldn't stay open. It's a pretty cutthroat industry. It's like a very tight margins if you're an art gallery owner. And so they just couldn't be open. So then it was already hard to get gallery representation as an artist, but it became that much harder, So then what ended up happening is a lot of artists like me were like, well, I got a website, I got some cardboard boxes, Like I can probably, I have people on Instagram that like my work. I can probably just figure out a way to sell it to them directly. And that's what a lot of artists are doing. And I remember a time, and there might be some kind of schools of thought that still are like this, but I remember a time like when I was in grad school 10, 15 years ago, people would say that galleries, were the only like respectable way to sell art, because if you were selling it on your own, I don't know, there was like a bias against that. And that might still be the case in some circles, but I think mostly people understand that artists got to eat, like you don't need a gallery to make a living, and to be respected as an artist. So there's two types of creators I want to touch on here. And this is important because I think there's some soul searching that needs to happen if you're thinking, I might want to sell my art. Okay, so there's two main types. There's the private creator. This is Emily Dickinson. I don't know if you know about Emily Dickinson, but she wrote poems privately that she wrote in her journal. And I think she even had like some written instructions like, please burn upon my death. No, she didn't want anybody to read her poems. So she wrote her poems for her own enjoyment. She doesn't need to show anybody what she was writing. She didn't want to show anybody what she was writing. In fact, there might even be some ethical concerns that if we read Emily Dickinson poems, she might be mad. Like, hey, I didn't want anyone to read them. So that's Emily Dickinson. She doesn't want the bother of trying to sell her work. She didn't want that, right? And there's lots of other artists that are like that. And sometimes they're called like a hobbyist, which I think is maybe not the greatest term. I don't love that term, but maybe an amateur or someone who's just doing it for fun. Like I sing in the shower, I sing in the car. I'm not going to go live with my singing. I don't have any interest in bringing my vocal stylings to the world in a public arena. Now there's also the ambitious creator. So the ambitious creator starts off making art for her own enjoyment. There's something in her, in us, in our hearts that says, I want to make something. And if it's visual art, it's like, oh, I have that in me, right? And it's definitely for love and it's definitely for enjoyment, but then it's also because there's something about the need to share it. And that ambitious creator wants to make an impact. That ambitious creator wants to inspire or provoke change or beautify. And that ambitious creator would love to make a few bucks because, it would be more fun to make money and keep doing it rather than struggle and have a full closet, right? Of all your art that you've made that you can't sell. So, I've been thinking about this quite a lot because I think sometimes like I was the type of personality that from the time that I was a little kid, like my parents have the story, I don't remember this, but when I was 3, I learned the ABCs for the first time, and they went to a diner to have some breakfast, and there was 4 or 5 other tables that were sitting and eating in the restaurant, and I went up to each one of them and I interrupted them. I was 3. I mean, I'm like, like knee high to a grasshopper, and I was like, I would like to sing you the ABCs. And then I performed the ABCs, and then they applauded. And then I went to the next table and sang the ABCs. So I was wired at a very young age to share with the world, like what I was making, which happened to be, in that case, the ABCs, which is very cute and funny. And then also when I was 17, I remember my very first art show, which was in a coffee shop that had brick walls. None of the art was framed. And I was like, well, how am I going to put this art on paper on the brick walls of this coffee shop? So I used blue sticky puck, that sticky weird stuff, and I used that to hang I do not recommend that. I do not recommend that for the art or for a number of things, but I was ready to do it. I wanted to share my work and I wanted to sell it. And so from a very young age, I knew that was a part of my personality. For other people, though, they might kind of transition there. And I'm curious, you in the chat, if you know already, if you are the kind of person that like started off ambitious, or maybe now you kind of were the private creator and now you're like, wait a second, do I want to share this? Do I want to sell this? Like, is this something that I could dream of? And then some of you might be like, no, I'm in it. I am actively selling my work. it's happening. So put in the chat which one you are, because I'm very curious to hear. I see some people that are selling. I mean, we're at the pricing art workshop, so I'm guessing most of you already have at least considered the idea of selling your work. Ambitious, just started selling, amazing. I've been dragging my heels about selling. Okay, well, there's some soul searching maybe there, because the private creator has a great life, my friends. The private creator just gets to make whatever they want, whenever they want. There's no pressure about anybody else's opinion. They can, they can go with the flow. They can try different mediums. They don't have to niche. They don't have to like get good. They don't have to feel like it's, spectacular work. Like there's a lot of freedom to be the private creator. And once you become the ambitious creator, you start to have to interact and engage with the world at large, which means there's a dance that happens between you and your collector, or you and your customer. And it's complex. It's not super straightforward. All right. Here's a formula. I've got a formula for you. The formula that creates a successful art business. And like I mentioned earlier, it starts with love. Love is the thing that, there's a lot of business formulas out there, but for artists, I think it's a little bit there's this added component that not necessarily all successful businesses need to have. But for artists, they start off because they love it. I would have made art even if I couldn't sell it. I would be creative even if I just stacked up my closet or had to recycle things or whatever. I do it anyway, So love is the very first element of the successful formula. The second is value, and I'm going to get into that in just a second. The third is demand. We have to have people that want what we're selling. And the fourth is profit. And the two that I'm really going to dive into today, there's your successful art business when all those things collide. The two that I'm going to really dive in today are value, which is when your collector thinks, oh, that price is right, I can afford that, or I can buy that, that makes sense. And profit means you are making more money than it costs to make. And a lot of artists sell their work, but they are not profitable. So we need to talk about that a little bit, because that's a really important part. If you're losing money when you're selling art, then you will not have a successful business. So something I want to talk about that I think is really helpful when we start thinking about selling our wares, selling our handmade items, is this little graph here. So on one side, we have the low-priced common, and then we have high-priced and rare. So here's some examples. On the low-priced and common, we have commodities. And commodities are things like gasoline and big box stores and canned food and paper products. There's stuff that there isn't necessarily going to be a lot of brand loyalty. If I'm driving down the street and there's gasoline for sale on either side of the road, I'll pick the cheapest one, or the one where I don't have to make a left turn, depending on the discount of the other station. But it's like, I don't care between two different, types of gas stations. Like, I just want the cheapest gas. So that's a commodity, right? Then on the other side of our little graph here, we have expensive and rare. So we have Tiffany's, and we have Rolex, and we have Prada, and we have Van Gogh and other art of its type. And so what's really interesting here is the way that commodities make money is that everybody needs it. Everybody needs canned food, or, any kind of produce or things that you can buy at the grocery store. Everybody needs paper goods. Everybody shops at the big box stores. Everybody needs gasoline. So they sell a tremendous amount of their product, and they have a very low margin. So I was actually talking to a buyer at a grocery store once, and I was asking him about margin. We'll get into what margin is in a second, but it's basically the profit, right? And so I was asking him about how they manage the margin on their grocery products. And so I was like, is it, 50%? Like, is the upcharge, really significant? And he's like, oh no, it's pennies or fractions of pennies. So the margin is so thin that they sell a can of soup and they get 0.5 cents. You know, I know this is probably a pretty global group and I'm talking in US dollars here, but so forgive me if I revert to dollars, because I'm sure there's lots of currencies that are in this group, but very, very, very low margin, but they sell so much of it. If you can sell 100,000 cans of soup at 0.5 cents a profit a can, it works out okay, right? So on the high margin, low volume, these things might be exceptionally expensive and they likely have a very high margin, but it's expected that they're going to be expensive and rare and amazing and, you know, beautiful. Art is not a commodity. And I think what happens for a lot of artists is when we're pricing our art, one of the things that makes a lot of sense to do, and I think it's a good idea, is we start looking around to see, okay, what in my category, what are other producers what are other producers charging for their work? So we look at other, you know, artists that are similar to us, and then we look at, you know, producers on Etsy, and maybe we swing into a gallery and we look around. And the problem is that, especially if we're looking at Etsy or online sellers, we will find that there are artists that are matching the prices that you might find at the dollar store, or, you know, like they're very, very, very inexpensive and are competing with, in the US, we have a store called Target. Do you have Targets in Mexico, Ana? No Targets. Okay.
No,
So we have a store. What do you have?
We all wish we had it though.
Right.
There's nothing like Target anywhere else in the world, I think.
Oh.
Yeah.
What about Walmart's? Walmart's must be everywhere, right? Or are they not?
Yes, there are Walmarts, but
There are Walmart's.
but it's not Target.
Not Target, not
That's
Target,
right.
right?
H&M is everywhere for sure.
Oh, okay. H&M, right? So, you know, somebody maybe is making jewelry and this jewelry producer is like, well, I went down to the H&M and the earrings there are 2 for $10. So I guess mine have to be 2 for $10. But then what that jewelry producer is doing is she's competing with a commodity market and she will lose. So it's better to position our art as a luxury item, because we can't possibly compete with the commodities market, because they can mass produce things and they can do things at such a scale that they can make money. We can't, because it's just, you know, me and my 2 hands over here, you know. So art is authentic, it's unique and one of a kind. There is like truth. It's special, it's rare, there's attention to detail, there's status. If somebody can afford to buy unique and significant handmade art, that there is a status element associated with that. There's beauty. There's something that a really brilliant marketing speaker named Seth Godin talks about. He talks about the race to the bottom. And that's when you are trying to compete with Walmart or H&M or low price sellers on Etsy, and you will lose money, item one. And number two, you will not build your brand, because the price tells the story of what your art is. And the reason I'm jumping on this so hard is that I do see occasionally artists overprice their work, but not very often. Most of the artists that I talk to, most of the artists I have a membership, and most of the artists in my membership struggle to raise their prices because they just feel like it's, you know, it's not going to sell. But it's a real problem if you can't be profitable, if you can't make money. So I'm going to talk about what being profitable actually is here in 1 second. But I just wanted to give you an example of a category that can fit in all sorts of different areas of this chart. So candles. Candles are exceptionally common. You can buy a bag of tea lights for a very small amount of money at the grocery store. You can get birthday candles, no problem. Now, if you are a seller of handmade candles, your products are going to be somewhere around the middle of the graph, you know, depending, and we'll talk a little bit about what it depends on. And, you know, they could be way up here with the Dior candle. I found this today at Nordstrom. I looked online because I was like, there's got to be some ridiculously expensive candles out there in the world. And sure enough, you could buy this candle for $1,150 US, which is an insane amount of money for people who literally have money to burn. They can buy this just bonkers candle. And then, for us creators, we might be able to like make our handmade candles valued at that extreme side of the graph, but we could also put them somewhere in the middle, depending on a number of things, which we'll get into. But the thing that I want to make sure that you don't do is put it at the bottom, is put it in the birthday candle category, because you will lose money. All right, so here's a basic formula, and pricing, gosh, does it get complicated? So this is just kind of what I use to help me as I am figuring out how to price my own work. So the thing that you have to be able to do is you have to understand your material costs, which is how much your art costs to make. So if you're a painter, you work on a canvas, that costs something. You work with paint, that costs something. And then there's overhead costs, which I don't actually add overhead costs into this particular formula, but overhead costs are important to keep in mind, because you will have to pay taxes. You have a studio, or even if it's your kitchen table, you have a space that has electricity and heat. You have the time that it takes you to photograph your work, to create a product listing, to promote your product listing. There's a lot of things that go into the sales of art. But what I want to focus for this particular formula is your material cost. So that's just the raw, the math, says Anna. Yes, indeed. Math. I love it. Math. So, like a lot of people ask, well, I don't know. I have, 30 tubes of paint and I just use a little bit for each painting. How do I possibly, quantify that? And I get, you have to kind of like sort of make some guesses. I make really thick paintings. And so I have literally weighed my paintings because I want to know exactly how much paint I'm using. And so I can get real particular about that. But you can be more squishy, so it's like, well, I spent, however many hundreds of dollars on paints. And then I probably didn't use more than 5% of each tube. It really depends. It's very, very specific to the maker. Then you have to think about your time. And this is not your whole expertise of all the years that you've spent learning how to make the thing. It's just the literal time of like how many hours you have spent on that object. Then I'm going to give you a little bit more details here in 1 second. I'm going to talk about the hourly rate in just a second. Then you need to come up with your wholesale cost. And I added a ×2 there, which is a 50% margin. And I'm going to get into some of the details here. And this is where it gets a little sticky here, but I'm going to try to make it fun. We're trying to make it fun because we're talking about money. We love money. Money is amazing. Money is the best. I actually read this book. It's called You Are a Badass About Making Money, which is really good, by Jen Sincero. And she's like, you got to sweet talk money. Don't talk bad about money. Don't say that you're going broke. Don't say that you hate money. Say that you love money. Say that you're a money magnet. So we are talking about money and it's fun. So margin is the difference between the sales cost of the item and the cost required to make it. So that's that ×2. So if we have a 50% margin, that means we double our costs so that we can get a decent margin. So here's how it breaks down. I'm gonna break this down for you. I know that if you're on your phone, this is probably like a teeny tiny little screen for you. I'm sorry, but I'll go through each thing. This is one of my paintings on the screen here, so you can see all that thick paint. So basic formula for pricing. This is total hypothetical. I just threw some numbers together. First, your material cost. So let's say I use $30 worth in paint and supplies. Let's say it takes me 2 hours and my hourly rate is $50 an hour. And I am going to talk a little bit more about how to determine what your hourly rate should be in just a moment. But just for the purposes of this, this formula, we'll say $50 an hour. And again, I'm sorry, this is in US dollars. And, so you'll have to like just make the, the change in your head if you're using a different currency. So then you multiply that by 2. So we have a 50% margin, and that equals your wholesale price is $260. And the reason why I'm making a emphasizing wholesale here is if you sell in any kind of gallery or store, there's usually a 50% markup. So that means the price doubles again. And if you are going to start, if you're going to sell, if your aim is to sell in a gallery or in a store, that can be really wonderful, but your prices then have to be consistent across the board. So if a gallery is selling your work and they're selling it for $520, and then somebody goes to your website and they see the same type of work and it's $260, well, the gallery is going to be mad. And then you will ruin your relationship with your gallery. So you have to keep your prices consistent across the board if you're working with galleries, which is a decision that every artist can make on their own. So the question that a lot of people ask, how to pay for your time. There's two ways to do it. There's an hourly rate, which is what I just was talking about, or there's an expertise rate. So what I like to say with the hourly rate is you want your hourly rate to be at least minimum wage, whatever that minimum wage is. And a lot of artists are making, such a small amount of money that it's laughable, so at least give yourself a minimum wage. And then you can decide based on how long you've been in business, how much education you have or experience. Like if you're a new artist right out the gate, maybe you don't need to necessarily charge as much. Ana says your education, your life experience, your skill, your story. Exactly. Also your branding. If you are well-known, if you have generated a niche audience that's really interested in what you have to produce, that means that your rates and your prices can go up. Another way to look at this is an expertise rate. And that would be if, for instance, a potter who can throw 200 mugs in an hour. I've known some like that can throw an incredible amount of pots. They're just very, very fast because they've done it so long. So then it wouldn't make sense for them to be like, well, I can throw, let's just call it 60 mugs an hour, just for sake of math simplicity. I can throw 60 mugs an hour and my rate is $50 an hour. So then that means each mug is $1 an hour. That just is like, doesn't make much sense because it takes a lot of skill to throw a bunch of mugs really fast. So then in which case that potter might say it's an expertise rate. So rather than quantifying, every second or hour or minute that I spend making this work, they can just say a mug, the rate is going to be X. It's going to be $25 or whatever, whatever it ends up being. Karina says, how often can you adjust those rates? So you start with a lower rate, but then you raise them. Yes, raising your rates is a good idea. And I think we'll get to that question at the end. So remind me, because that's a good question. I'll come back to that one. Both rates can be based on experience and education and established reputation. So if you went to, if you got a job at an accountant company, because you were an accountant, if you had never, you had the certifications, but you had never worked as an accountant, you would make less money. And so I think that you can kind of use that same sort of formula for determining what your rates should be as an artist. Like you just start, when you're new, you start out with less, and then you can build it over time. And established reputation is a very big deal. So you might be one of those private creators that has tons and tons and tons of work that you've made over the years, but you don't have an established reputation. So even though you have a tremendous amount of experience, you might not have the reputation yet to command higher prices. Sirius says something really great. Cedia, I guess I mispronounced that maybe. Cedia says, Gary Vee just talked about this on an Instagram post. I love Gary Vee. He is so controversial, but I just love him so much. He swears a lot and he's hilarious. He said that each time he upped his speaking fees until the market said no. So that makes a lot of sense to me. You kind of like play around with pricing until you stop being able to sell. So it's like you just kind of keep on bringing them up. So I'm going to wrap up here and then we'll be able to jump over to questions. I know there's a lot. This is a complex topic and I love talking about money, so I could just go on and on and on. But one of the things that I think is real helpful for anybody, even a beginning artist, this can be really useful. To appeal to a wider audience, consider price tiers. So price tiers are just different price buckets that different categories of your work can fall into. And there's a couple reasons why this is really helpful. One, you can connect with a really wide market segment, so there might be many people that can't afford high-end original art, but they could afford a print, so if they really like your work, but they're just not ready to buy original art, it's like, oh, great. Well, I can get a print, or I can get some swag, or I can get a sticker set or something like that, So that would be the tier 1 no brainer. So I like to think of that as like the food truck lunch for two, like it's not, it's not an extraordinary amount of money. Tier 2 would be accessible, which is like a nice dinner out for two. So you're going to a nice restaurant, you're dressed up, you're with your honey, and you spend a few bucks. You have a couple glasses of wine or something and a nice meal. It costs something, right? And that would definitely fit into the accessible categories. In tier 3, this would be aspirational. So this is when the work is significant. It's a significant purchase where, if your collector is a part of, married or, with a partner, they might need to discuss it with their partner. Like, it's kind of like, it takes some thought, like, is the wall the right size? So we're going to spend a significant amount of money here. Is this going to fit? And then the third tier or the fourth tier is something that probably for a beginning artist isn't likely to happen right away, but you might consider offering an epic tier, which would be like a car or a small apartment, like all sorts of things. And the epic tier would be public art. So I have in Minneapolis at the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport, I have a 200 square foot mosaic mural. That was a 6-figure project. It was a really big deal. It took me about a year, and I'm not a mosaic artist, so I had to learn, and that is epic. It's, it's a lot of times it would be a hospital or a business or, an office. It wouldn't necessarily be, unless it's like Brad Pitt or something that wants me to do something cool for his house, which I'm available, Mr. Pitt. I'd be ready. You just fly me out to wherever, Ibiza or wherever, I'm there, and I'll make something awesome for your house. So this can be really helpful to sort of think about things that could fit into the tiers. Okay, so this is the end of my presentation. I know there's some questions. So what are you seeing, Ana? What should we cover here first?
Yeah, I wrote down one that you wanted to come back to, which is from Karina, and she says, how often can you adjust your rates without throwing customers off?
Yeah, so one of the things that I like to do is a reverse sale. And so what a reverse sale is when you have a set price that you've been selling your work at, and then you say, this is the last sale at that rate. So my rates are going to be changing next month, and they're going up 10%, but you can get them now for, this other rate, the rate that I've been doing. And so then you let people know my prices are going up, but get in now before, because then it adds a little urgency and scarcity, and people are like, ooh, her rates are going up, that's a good thing to happen for.
Yeah, I was going to say the exact same thing. You can always announce, this is the last month where my prints will be at this price, or, just let your people know, and they will understand. And it's not only that your rate as an artist is going up, there is also inflation, and there's so many other factors. I mean, that's just that's just basic economics, but there's some really interesting conversations going on here. Oh, and by the way, Maggie, which is one of our co-hosts from Magic Jungle, finally was able to get in. We have a full house here, so she was waiting for someone had to go to the doctor, and Maggie was able to come in. So hi, Maggie, I know you're here. Okay, so Josie, I wanted to get into, I think there's a couple of questions here that for me, from my knowledge, I know that you covered in the tiers part, but maybe you can get a little bit more specific there, because they're asking, will you also cover the prints side of business? So like making art prints, for example. And then somebody is saying doubling for margin, then doubling again for retail seems like it pushes the price so high. Any thoughts that can help me with this? And I immediately thought, well, tiers, right? Like you can have all these different price points available, and prints would fall into the lower side of this. I mean, that's the way I see it. I mean, it depends
Yes.
on the
Yeah.
print, depends on the print, right? But it's
Yeah.
relatively cheap to make, and it's something that can have a really high margin, which is where I've made most of my money when I was beginning selling my art. It was always in prints, because you can do like times 10 basically for what the actual print costs, but what you're selling is the beautiful artwork that you made. So that prints are actually pretty awesome.
Yeah, the margin's good. The labor is almost nil, so you have to photograph it, but then you have a digital photograph that you can you can certainly have it printed yourself, or excuse me, you can also use, one of those print on demand services. Like off the top of my head, I think there's Society 6 is one, and there's Fine Art America that's actually worldwide. And Fine Art America is kind of cool. They have plants all over the world. So that's kind of great, because that means they can really cut down on shipping. So you can, I have a lot of fans in Australia, but it's crazy expensive for me to ship to Australia. So there's a Fine Art America, which is, I think it's called Pixels. They have a different name. I think it's Pixels. You'll have to correct me if that's pixels.com, Fine Art America.
Mm-hmm.
So you can put your digital image up there, and then you can sell it anywhere in the world, and then you get a cut of that profit. And they do everything. They do the printing, and they do the shipping and the fulfillment and the customer service and all that stuff. So that can be helpful. Printful is one. Yep, I see that one in the chat.
And Josie, it's like this big, we call it in Magic Jungle, we made the list, which is basically an entire list of different ways that you can sell art. And that, like, there's a whole section for prints, which is what you're saying. You can do print on demand, and then you can print yourself. But I have a really cool question here from Patricia, and she's talking about craft shows, right? And she lives in a small town. So I really love this question, because I think there's a lot of like a fun conversation that can happen around it. And she says, I'm in a small town, so should the prices be different than if I were living in a bigger town or even a big city? Like even the cost of living in New York is different than it would be in a different city in the US or in the world. What do you think about that? It's an interesting one, right?
That is interesting. I mean, it really depends on, I know many artists that only do in-person sales. They either sell through a gallery, or they do through art or craft fairs or things like that. And then,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to say, then your pricing structure has to meet, has to kind of compare to other types of work in your field in that area, so which is by the way, what H&M would do. H&M would probably change their prices depending on where the store was located, depending on what currency it was, depending on, what was hot there in those locations. And I'm sure those big chains that are everywhere in the world have so much data, they know, that a certain color is really big, like.
And that's what my comment was going to be. So obviously there's, even when they do what the price of gas is in different cities, there's what's the price of a Big Mac? In Spanish, it's called tropicalización. It means that the price is adjusted, or the product is adjusted to your current location. And what I would suggest, like what I would do if I were in this scenario, I think someone else is saying, oh, I live in a small town in Italy and there is a price limit, it's just lower. What I would do is, when I would be selling at local craft fairs, which I did do in Mexico City for so many years, I would have special deals at the local fairs. So I would have my ideal selling price, let's say that price was, I don't know, like $50 a print, right? But what I would have when I would do these local markets would be 2 for 1, like special price because you're buying here at this bazaar, at this craft fair. And that would let people know this is my price for the world. But since you're here and we're local, and we're also honestly cutting out all the fees and all this different, you know, there's just different fees that go with selling your art online. It would also give me the opportunity to still make a really nice margin if I'm selling to a lower price at the local market. So that might be a good idea for these people who are asking about having this price limit because of their geographic location. Maybe you can have a special local deal, which will also make the people who are shopping in person feel special. They're having direct access to you. So I don't know if that might be a
Yeah. And I wanted to come back. That's really good. I like that idea. And I think I think the chat there, somebody was saying that she had done a couple local markets and they didn't go that well for her, which is what happens. It's a heck of a lot of work to get all your work ready and then get it out there, and you have to gallery sit or sit with your stuff for a weekend. And it's a lot of work. And then if you don't sell, it's really frustrating. However, I have done so many live events, and most of them, I think maybe I broke even, and in some cases had some really good success. But I would always say it's a good idea if you have the opportunity to do at least some live events, because it's really great to talk to people in real life about your work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And especially when you're in the more, not that if you're successful you can't sell locally, but it's a really great way for people who are starting out to test the waters as well. There's no other scenario in the world where you can be there one-on-one, seeing people's faces when they see certain pieces of work. And maybe you love a painting that you made and everyone hates it. Like that happens. That happens. And then you can sort of take cues. Okay, well, maybe if I'm thinking of selling my art, maybe this type of art is more interesting to the general public. For me, going local is always a really good option. And even if like right now Sonia is saying, I'm trying to move out of the local price range market and think more globally due to the internet, but it's so hard. I don't think it's that hard. I think that there's so many options, like what Josie just shared, even having a print on demand site, growing your social media. There's definitely a way out. And now that you have the expertise of actually sharing in your local market, I think you have a good start there.
So I wanted to come back to this question. I think it's from Catherine. It says, doubling for margin, then doubling again for retail seems to push the price so high. True. Any thoughts or help? So I have a couple responses to that. One is, because most of us are, solopreneurs. It's me, it's my labor hours, it's my supplies. I'm not paying anyone else to make anything. So that means I can be kind of squishy about that margin, and I can be squishy about my rate. So I could say, well, it's the cost of materials is $30 and normally my rate's $50, but I'll figure out what is the margin? What's the profit I need to make on this? What's the minimum profit I need to make to get that sweet spot pricing? And so you can be a little bit flexible, but the thing I don't want you to do is to compete with commodities, because you will never make any money and you will lose money just on your materials, not to mention your time, so you can be squishy there. And then the other thing I was going to say about that is, I don't currently sell in any galleries. I'm not opposed to it. I would, but right now I sell everything I make out of my website. So I'm not really in the market for another kind of representation. However, I have friends that do both. They sell from their own shop, and then they also sell in galleries, and they've run into this problem with that margin. So I have a friend who makes these lovely illustrations, or like little animal illustrations, and she sells them. She sells a ton of them, and she has figured out a sweet spot of a pricing that her audience really likes in real life. And she is not able to make any money if she sells them at a gallery for that same price. But she likes to work with galleries sometimes. So what she's done is that she keeps those particular kinds of work for her own audience and her own sales, so she can keep that price point at the sweet spot. Like, you don't want to price yourself out of the market. If you find the price that's working, then you want to stay there as long as you're making a profit. So then what she does instead, when she's working with a gallery, is she just creates a different kind of work. So in her case, she makes large oil paintings that are quite a bit more expensive, and they sell, but they're really different than her bread and butter, which are these little illustrations that she sells a bajillion of. So she's able to differentiate. So then if a customer or a gallery owner was like looking at her website, they wouldn't be like, wait a second, like, why is it so different? There's homogeneity within the pricing that would not be confusing to a consumer. So there's an answer. I think your mic's off.
I'm just trying to stay updated in the chat because there's quite a bit going on. Oh, this is interesting. So Corazon y Punto, she's asking, is it right to change prices depending on the client? Like, is it correct? She means like, is it like I guess morally right? Or
Well, I would say that for commissions, they're always more expensive, for sure, without question, because there's a tremendous amount of hand-holding that goes on when I'm working with especially like a private buyer that's getting art for their house. Like there's so much communication. It's very emotional, and I don't love that process because it's really hard for me to get into someone's head. I'd much rather make something and have someone say, oh, I love it, I have to buy it, because then it's like I'm over here making my art and then somebody is attracted to it. Yay. But with commissions, I always add a premium. And if Brad Pitt called me, I would add a premium. Like, for sure, I would add more, but I think that if it's hard to know exactly what you're asking there, Corazon, but I think that probably if I was doing a market in New York, my prices would be different if I was doing a market in Boise, Idaho, like it would be, I would do it differently, for sure.
Yeah, and I do have a feeling she's Michelle's here. Yeah, Corazón y Puntos. Michelle, she is, I'm pretty sure she's asking about if there's a client, that probably means it's some sort of commission, right? Because if you are selling to the general public, you do have one set price. You can't like respond to someone in real time. Oh, you look like you have more money, you should, this is your price. Like, that would not be good. But commissions, I also want to point out that, for example, if you are doing illustration and you get commissions, there's definitely different types of clients and what you're going to get out of it. So, I mean, maybe you'll have some sort of exposure that's really amazing. For example, like I've worked a lot with magazines like Vanity Fair or Glamour, or these, huge editorials that have hundreds of thousands of prints, and people get really, I don't know, it has this like prestige to it, right? But they pay way less than, I mean, right now I'm doing illustrations for a cheese company that you would not think, and they're the highest paying client I've had in a really long time. And I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know this would happen. But so I think that I say yes to this editorial stuff because it's not just the money. It's more like, oh, it's going to help my portfolio. It's going to give me, the exposure is good, but I think more it's about your branding as an artist. So there's a lot to talk about with different prices for different clients. And there's also your friend, like maybe you have a really good friend and you can give them a discount. Like, that does happen. That's, I think, a whole nother topic, like the commission side, which I get it, Josie, you don't love that part.
Yeah, it really, I mean, there's some artists, like pet portraits are huge, and my sister does pet portraits. And so she has come up with a super streamlined system to cut down on some of that like craziness that happens sometimes with commission. So there's ways to do it. There are absolutely ways to do it. So I have a price minimum. Like I'm like, I won't do a commission at all if it doesn't meet a price threshold, because it's just not worth it for me, so,
Yeah,
so there's that. For sure. And then, a thing about friends and family. Many times our friends and family are incredibly supportive and they're so wonderful, and they'll pay our full prices because they want to support us. But sometimes we have like a crazy Aunt Marge, and she's like, "What? You're charging how much for that?" And it gives us a lot of stress, or thinks that they're going to get something like free or really cheap or whatever. And so that can be real hard to navigate because, especially if I'm talking to someone that I care about and they want, a discount, or they want to get something cheap from me, I'm too much of a softie, and I'm just like, okay, fine. In fact, why don't I pay you to take my art? I lose my head. So one of the things that I recommend, because I know I've heard from a lot of people that definitely struggle with this with friends and family, is I like to say, oh, cool, you're interested in that kind of work. Oh, that's awesome. I'm going to have to check my pricing notes at home and send you an email about this. Cause I just want to make sure that I can get that, get my numbers right. And, you always get the friends and family discount, and maybe it's 10% or whatever, you can do anything you want, but that way it creates a little professionalism and a little distance. And if you say, well, my prices are X, and they're like shocked and horrified, you don't have to feel the pressure. You don't have to feel horrible, like you're like, no, listen, my prices are my prices. I've done the work. I've looked at my margins. I know how much it costs. I know how long it takes me. This is what it costs. And then you can have those conversations over email, or, with a little bit of distance between you and that person. And that helps. I find.
Yeah, no, for sure. We have time for a couple more questions before we hop off, and I'm going to ask Josie a few questions also of like how you guys can stay in touch with her and learn more from Josie. But okay, Christy asked, when you're starting to sell, is it better to do prints or originals? And I have my thoughts on this, but what do you think, Josie? That's a good question.
I mean, I would say always all, because I like price tiers. Even if you're just starting out, I would say price tiers are great. So it elevates the value of the print if you can be like, well, the original is $1,000 and the print is 20 or 50 or whatever, and then it's like, but you can get the original, and that makes it more special. I don't think that's a problem. I mean, I like it, actually. I like price tiers in that way. I think that's really helpful.
So in Magic Jungle, we talk a lot about how artists are sensitive. That's kind of part of most of our nature. And one of the things that happened to me when I started selling my art was that I got really bummed out when I noticed that I just wasn't good enough yet, and people weren't willing to buy my originals for the true cost, right? What you were talking about, the materials, the time, but I also wasn't at that point where people would pay thousands of dollars for my original art. And I quickly noticed from feedback, okay, people are only buying prints. So I started out selling prints, and it sort of like led me on a specific path where I did more applications with my art, or surface printing, etc. And now 13 years later, I think I'm finally ready to do some large format artwork. I mean, that's how long it can take, and it's fine. I think everyone has their own individual process, and it really depends on where you're at and what your specific path is going to be as well. And someone is asking, can I still sell prints if I sell the original? This also depends. It depends on a few different things, like legal aspects. If you're licensing your art, you can't sell the original, for example, because that means that somebody else could end up like scanning that original or something and then using it, which would interfere with a contract, for example. So, and oh, maybe this one, Josie. So she's asking if there's any recommendations. Alina's asking for shipping partners, like US and international. So I guess this means she shipped from US.
Well, yeah, based in the US, I like USPS, which would only work for you if you're in America, in the North America. But when I do international shipping, I switch to UPS or FedEx, which is pretty global, I would think. I think you can find both of those, and DHL is another one. Those are kind of the big three for international shipping. And I have found that UPS is shockingly good. It's also shockingly expensive. So sadly, my international rates are very, very high now because I don't make any profit on it. I just pass the cost to the consumer. But it's like, shit, like I just did a sale this weekend and there was a few people from France and one from Australia, and it was like $45 to sell like to ship a small thing to Australia. But with UPS, it usually comes within like 4 or 5 days. It's crazy. I just shipped something to Japan and it came, I think it was like 3 days. It was over the weekend, and it got to her from Minnesota, dead center of the US, to Japan in 3 days. UPS.
And I'm not sure if this exists in other countries, but this is more of a fulfillment service, just with shipping. And someone in the Magic Jungle Facebook group shared this company called Skydrop. And I haven't used it personally, but I've heard things about it. And basically I think what they do is they can buy guides, like FedEx guides, and in really large quantities, and then you get a lower, I mean, there's creative solutions for all of this because online sales are such a big thing now. I'll put that in the chat. It's called Skydrop if anyone's interested in looking. But Michelle, for example, 45, me living in Mexico where we don't have the United States Postal Service, which is uncomparable to any other postal service in the world. That's normal. Like you get used to paying anytime I order anything from like ASOS or even, I mean, just any website that's in another country, I'm used to paying that, or Free People or shops that I like that don't exist here. You just get used to paying those high prices. We have so many more good questions here, but I think we'll have to envia.com. That's a good one. Thank you for the tips for Mexico people. Lala Move. I'm actually going to write these down because the chat has some good tips. And envia.com. So Josie, this was so fun, so amazing. I mean, we could keep talking about this for the rest of the day. And we do, like, whenever we meet up, we talk a little bit about our lives, but then it's like, what's new in the art biz world? So Josie, tell us a little bit more about where people can keep learning from you. How do you share your expertise? What can, how can people stay in touch?
Yeah, awesome. Well, you can find me at Josie Lewis Art. I'll put it in the chat. Josie Lewis Art on pretty much every social channel. And then if you're interested in more of the art biz type chat, I have another Instagram channel called The Josie Show, which is where I talk about, there's tips and there's art police and there's haters, and it's more me talking. So it's a little bit different than my art channel. Then of course my website is josielewis.com, and I have a membership that is for artists that want to sell their art. It's called Art Revenue Coaching, and I have created a special offer. The doors are closed right now, but just in case there was anybody in this group that was interested in learning a little bit more about it, you can go to josielewis.com/ARC just to learn about what it is. And ARC has a whole bunch of training. There's all sorts of training about like pricing and shipping and making prints and artist productivity and all sorts of things like that. And then there's live calls at least a couple times a month. We have critique calls and we have small group calls and all sorts of things. So there's tons of ways to get supported as an artist. And I put together a special offer for you. And this is a private link, but I'm going to put it in the chat. And this is josielewis.com/magic for Magic Jungle. And the /magic link will give you a $1 offer. So you can join as a trial member for $1. And then it ends up being, you can either join as a yearly member or a monthly member. So you can check out all the details there. But if you want to just see what it's all about, you can join for $1 and cancel within a week and, you'll get to see what it is. And if you like it, then I'd love to see your face there more often.
Oh, thanks, Josie. Yeah, it's really cool that you're sharing this because I feel like we really complement each other. What we offer at Magic Jungle and your area of expertise goes, it covers like a different side of being your own art business or even having your own art brand, right? I just asked Maggie to unmute because she was able to join in. Our room got full, so Maggie finally was able to jump in here. And as you guys know, we host our yearly retreat for creatives. And when I started to learn about Josie having ARC, I see a lot of people here. ARC has been incredible for me so far. I love it. So I feel like you have this side to the whole art business that is really specific. I love that you do talk about math. You just, you found a really cool way to detail all of this information and make it fun, which I think is really important. Just having fun and be able to have this social part of your community is really important for us at Magic Jungle as well. So I'm so happy that we were able to team up. And thank you, Yoli. Thank you. It's magical seeing you, learning from you too, Josie. Awesome. Okay, so I think, yeah, so Lindsay's saying ARC has been very helpful for me too. It sounds like an amazing space. Josie, knowing you as a person, I'm sure you offer just the best, most high quality advice ever in the art biz world. So so everybody use that special link that Josie shared. It's josielewis.com/magic. And you can learn all about it. And she has a special deal for everyone who is in this webinar. It'll be just $1, which is really cool. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Josie. Any last words before we sign off?
It's been delightful. Love spending time with you.
Yeah, I'm seeing here, ARC is amazing. Great advice. Thank you so much. Oh, thank you all for being here. And we also had some questions about how to come to the retreat. Just make sure you're signed up to our newsletter. Retreat happens every February and we open up registration in the fall.
And I'm going to be there. And you can ask me, we can talk about money the entire time.
Hey, by the way, like every mealtime, lunch, breakfast, dinner, coffee breaks, all that, this fun conversation is flowing. So I'm excited to have you there next year, Josie. All right. Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye. Bye-bye-bye.